Hello guys, welcome back. Today we're going to be previewing the highly interesting New York Rangers versus Tampa Bay Lightning Eastern Conference Finals matchup. Now we got an amazing duel here between two teams that are almost completely different. The Tampa Bay Lightning, who have had all the playoff success over the past couple of years, and the New York Rangers, who are coming into the fold and having that true playoff success just this season. But when it comes to the Eastern Conference Final, which team will move on to the Stanley Cup Final, and what do you need to know about this amazing Eastern matchup? Watch till the end for the full preview and the full predictions for this series, and make sure you hit that subscribe button if you are new to the Sportsnet YouTube channel for the best sports coverage around. And without further ado, let's get into the final two teams in the Eastern Conference. Now the thing is, if you went into this season saying the Tampa Bay Lightning were going to go to the Eastern Conference Final, that's a pretty simple prediction to make, but the New York Rangers are a completely different story. Even though I saw the Rangers doing pretty well, and I saw them doing better than most other people, I saw them just making the playoffs, maybe having some playoff success, maybe winning a round, but definitely not getting to the Eastern Conference Final, let alone having a home ice advantage versus the Tampa Bay Lightning, which is one situation I don't see many people talking about. Now, for the Rangers, not having home ice advantage didn't really matter too much as they still got the win in the end, but for the Rangers, they were 6-1 at home throughout the playoffs so far with a 2-5 record away. Even though they got a couple of big road wins, at the same time, they've really been scratching and clawing to get there. As for the Tampa Bay Lightning, they're 4-1 at home and 4-2 away from things, so they're much more balanced. But for the Rangers, having potentially that hot start and that start at home and at MSG could change the tide of this series. Now, usually with these playoff previews, we go through the forwards, the defenses, and then the goaltending, but that would be a disservice to the goaltending matchup we are going to see in this year's Eastern Conference Finals with Igor Shesterkin and Andrei Vasilevskiy. And one of the most interesting parts, I think, about this matchup is that for the first few games of both these goaltenders' playoffs, it wasn't as prolific. I mean, for Andrei Vasilevskiy, especially versus Toronto, in those first few games, there were some concerns if he was going to be good enough to get that series win in the end and going to be good enough to win against Toronto, because the Leafs were really pouring on the goals and just allowing so many different opportunities. And especially with Igor Shesterkin too, he started off pretty rough versus the Penguins. But for Andrei Vasilevskiy, since he had that Game 6 versus Toronto, he's been brilliant. In 5 games, in that Game 7 and the Tampa and the Florida series, he's had a .978 save percentage. As for Igor Shesterkin, since his Game 5, he's been brilliant, where he's played 7 games, getting a 7-3 record and a .939 save percentage. Both of these goaltenders have been among the best in the NHL playoffs, and both of these goaltenders were some of the best in the second round specifically. I don't see that stopping anytime soon, and since both of these guys have their groove, I think it'll be a goaltending series through and through. Much different than what we're seeing with Mike Smith versus Darcy Kemper. And for me, there's a big difference between boring hockey and low-scoring hockey that is dominated by goaltending. I think we'll see the latter throughout most of this series. And even though the goaltending matchup will be fantastic, I think we'll still see a lot of opportunities and a lot of great chances back and forth. But there's so many interesting parts in this series. For one, the Rangers are a team that loves to come back in games. They never quit, whether it be in the games or the series. And even if Tampa even wins in like 5 games or something, I still see the Rangers keeping almost every single game close. As for the Tampa Bay Lightning, over the past couple of years, there's no other team that has been better at closing games out. They've been such a great team at making those leads stay, and especially late in games, closing those games no matter what. So you have one team that loves to come back, loves to never quit, and one team that loves to close out games and get the job done. It's going to be a battle, and especially late in games, it's going to be a war. Now let's look at the lines for both of these teams, because especially for the Lightning, they're dealing with a lot right now. You got Brandon Point, who for the foreseeable future will likely still be out, and even though Tampa is 5-0 without him, there could be a lot that changes versus the New York Rangers. And they also got Brandon Hagel, who's been dealing with his own ailments. He could be in for Game 1, he could not be, but right now they got Cole Kopke, who has never played an NHL game in his spot. But for the Lightning Lions, you got Stamkos, Charlie Kucherov, Grav, Killorn, Paul, and Palat. Then you got Kopke, Colton Perry, and Maroon, Bellemare, and Riley Nash. As for those lines right now, they're looking a lot weaker than they likely should if Tampa was truly 100%. If you put Hagel in there, it obviously looks better, but at the same time, even having Riley Nash in the lineup isn't exactly ideal for Tampa. As for the Rangers, even though you don't have Sammy Blais in the lineup and he's still injured, they're looking mostly as good as they should. You got Chris Kreider, Zibanejad, and Frank Vatrano, Artemi Panarin, Strome, and Kopp, Lafreniere, Hedel, and Kakko, that amazing kid line, and then the fourth line of Mott, Goodrow, and Ryan Reeves. Throughout the lineup, they're perfectly healthy and ready to go, and even though Tampa's top six is still going to be great, at the same time, the Rangers might just have some more depth here, especially when you go to that fourth line who's going to make games exceedingly difficult for the Tampa Bay Lightning. I know a lot of people will say Tampa in 4 or Tampa in 5, but when you look at the lineups and look at where they're shaping up right now, the Rangers are much healthier, and they just play games too. They might be a little bit more on the tired side, but at the same time, they have the momentum, and I think a lot of that forward group, especially that kid line and that bottom six in general, will have a lot of momentum and a lot of fire in the first couple of games. Now let's move on to that defense, and this is where it starts to favor Tampa Bay a little bit, in my opinion. When you look at the defense pairs, you got Hedman, Chernak, McDonough, Bogosian, and Sergachev, Foote. As for the Rangers, you got Lindgren and Fox, excellent first pairing. You got Miller and Trouba, especially has been solid, and Braun and Schneider. But overall, I look at both of these defenses, and I do give the edge to Tampa. They got 3 amazing defensemen, and they got one in every single pair, with Sergachev being on that third pairing, which I think is especially going to make the Rangers forward group a lot more careful and a lot more protective. And I feel like having one of those guys on it every single second of the game is going to make the game a lot different for the Rangers. But you look at that defense, and even though you got great defensemen like Lindgren, like Fox, like Trouba has been throughout much of this playoff run, I still give the edge to Tampa, mostly because of their systems, mostly because of the defensemen they have, with Victor Hedman being that amazing number 1, and also having Andrei Vasilevskiy in front of them. I mean, he's one of the best goaltenders in saving low danger and mid-range shots, and Tampa's going to do a great job throughout this series in trying to make the Rangers play on the perimeter and get outside that slot. For the Rangers, though, especially with that forward lineup, the power play and those special teams are going to be so important. Now, the special teams between these two teams are pretty interesting. For the Rangers, they're second on the power play with a 32.5% rates. As for the Lightning, they're only at 22.9%, so a pretty big difference there. As for the penalty kill, the Lightning have the big advantage, being 87.8% on the penalty kill, while the Rangers are 80.5%. So there's pretty big differences for both teams in the power plays and the penalty kills, but especially, let's say it's a Rangers power play, I give a huge advantage to Tampa Bay, mostly because of their structure. And I feel like for the Rangers, they're going to face a defense, they're going to face goaltending that they've never faced before. Even though Antti Raanta did play like a starter versus Carolina, it is still a factor. Vasilevskiy is the way better goaltender, and especially when you get down in the depths of the playoffs, Vasilevskiy has proved to be the best. And the thing is, even though the Rangers could definitely win this series, there's a decent chance of it happening. At the same time, I think their path to get to the Stanley Cup final right now is way harder than Tampa's path right now. Even though Tampa is a lot more injured and is a lot less healthy, at the same time, they've had that experience, and they are such a good team at closing games out. They got that Andrei Vasilevskiy factor. Their defense, I think, can be better in those key moments than the Rangers' defense will be, and I think that's what honestly might put the Lightning over the top. But at the same time, if the Rangers have the power play advantage, if they have the special teams advantage, if they can get maybe even 2 wins at home to start things off, this series could look completely different. But for the Tampa Bay Lightning and what they've proven over these past couple of years, to bet against them, for me, would be quite a bit foolish right now. To me, they'd be my Stanley Cup winner, and I feel like for the Rangers, even though they will put up a fight, I still see this Tampa team having the advantage in the key playoff areas, being more physical, being more defensive, and likely having the better goaltender in this series. Igor will still be fantastic, but he'll have to be second best in this series, and I think Andrei Vasilevskiy and the Tampa Bay Lightning will move on to the Stanley Cup final and win this series in 6. It'll be close, and again, I could still see a world where the Rangers win this series with the momentum they have, but at the same time, this Tampa Bay team has done it time and time again, and I think this is a beatable Rangers team for them, an inexperienced Rangers team that they can beat, just like the Florida Panthers were before them. I see Tampa getting it done, and I see them being among the final 2 in the NHL playoffs for the 3rd straight year. But that'll be it for today, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Let me know in the comments down below what you agree and disagree with my predictions. What do you predict for this series? Do you see the Rangers winning? Do you see the Lightning winning? And how many games? Let me know your thoughts down below. Let me know when it comes to the forward group, the defense, the goaltending, who you prefer, which team has the advantages. Let me know your thoughts down below. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell if you haven't already. Share this video with your friends. Get it out there to all hockey fans you guys know. And I will see you in the next video. Have a great one, y'all, and goodbye.